Welcome back to West Texas View.
Welcome back to the West Texas View. Dr. Jane and Dr. Caples have been talking about the psychiatry and psychology of medicine. And I asked just before the break, is it harder to treat men or women in psychiatry and psychology? And also the same applies, is it harder to treat adults or children? And that may not be a good way to say it, is it harder to, but answer that the best you can.
Well, I'll start because I have a feeling we might have very different opinions because we have different genders. My practice is primarily women, and a lot of that I think because women may have an easier time coming and talking. I have a few men that come in to see me, but when they find it very difficult typically to really get to the emotional component of what's really getting them. Part of what I do is really extracting those emotions that are difficult to deal with, the sadness, the anger. And for men, it could pose a particular challenge, partially because of our American culture that says men are supposed to be strong, and you don't cry and you don't do certain of these. If they have not had counseling before or psychiatric help before, then it feels a little different to me to work with a man, a little more challenging. Dr. Jane may say something very different.
No, I agree with you, Dr. Caples, to a very large extent. It's true that women are more in tune and they more readily are willing to seek help. In my opinion, when I see patients, I think definitely gender makes a difference, but it also makes other factors that are very important is where the patient is coming from. If the patient is suffering from a long-standing problem, or is this a crisis? How bad is the crisis? What is the education status of the person? The more educated they are more in tune about the emotional status. How psychologically they're minded they are. Some people are more psychologically minded. They have more in tune the emotions and the thoughts. Other things are important are the family structure and family support. If they find that the family be more receptive and understanding to it, they're more likely to share things. But in mental field also, we have to understand that it's not only what the patient is conscious and know about. There are a lot of things which are below the water, subconscious levels, and they may not know why they're behaving, why they're feeling this way, unless we are able to connect the dots either from their past or how they perceive things. So a whole lot of it is definitely with patients knowing what's going on and not willing to share or having some reservations about sharing. But also mental illness is also like a tip of the iceberg. What you see is only very 1/3 or 1/5 of it. The majority of it is below the water, and how you feel, how you perceive things has got to do with a number of different factors. A whole lot of it is your upbringing, your cultural values, what kind of values and disciplinary action or care and affection you got from your early childhood days, what kind of life experiences you had in your life, your genes, as I mentioned before, and people around you.
And if you have a husband and wife, and the wife is forcing the husband to go to a psychiatrist or the other way around, that looks like it would play into it too.
Oh, sure.
Well, that play into it, and I say whatever gets the person into the door, gets the foot in the door, if it's pressure from the spouse or pressure from the employer or any pressure that gets into that, and then becomes our part and the patient's part to work in tune to help the patient understand, okay, you're in the door right now, let's find out what's going on.
But one of the key things that you said a while ago is we've got to build trust between the patient and the
very
medical
important.
person.
That includes in my specialty also.
Exactly.
Trust is very important. And I've seen that patients are more likely to take medication, more likely to accept side effects, because all medication has side effects, more likely to be patient with the medications if they trust me more than if they don't trust me.
Exactly. And for what I do, the patient is talking about very difficult experiences in their life, whether they have guilt or regret or lots of sadness. And so that trust is key, because for so many people, they don't talk about the difficult times. They put it on a shelf, as we call it, and avoid it. And they don't really have people in their lives that they feel like they can talk to about their emotions and things that they're struggling with. So trust is key in what I do, because a lot of times I am the only person that knows that these situations have happened or are currently going on for the person.
And one of the things that when we're talking about between children and adults, that we said, is it harder to treat a child or an adult? It looks to me like a child would be much more open
Right.
and trusting. And
Well, it depends. Again, with a child, how can you expect a child who has been abused mostly by an adult or anything, or have bad experiences in life, to trust another adult who's sitting in front of you and asking you very strange questions? So it also depends on that. And child is more in dynamic situation than an adult is. Every life, every moment is the child grows, learns, and progresses things. You know, there are also a lot of biological changes happening in those times. I'm talking about adolescence with hormone changes, peer pressure, peer relationships. So there are a lot of normal developmental tasks the child has to achieve. So it's a stage of extreme stress, extreme change. So it can be either way. A child who is, again, who's very tuned with what's going on in his life, or really understands or has the good family support about dealing about what problem he has, is more likely to be receptive. A child can never be treated by itself, by himself or herself. A child is only a part of the family.
That's right.
So a lot of times in children, you don't only just treat the child, you treat the parent also.
Yes.
Because without treating the parent, whatever gains you make in child are going to be very temporary and short-sighted.
Right.
So
That
of course,
is-
in general, treating children and adolescents is particularly more difficult.
It is.
And that's why it requires more special training in terms of psychiatry. It requires extra 2 years of special training to be able to learn and understand children than it takes for to learn and understand an adult.
And one of the things that you just said, though, earlier about suicide,
Right.
and that is a whole different subset of things that you have to work with
Oh, yeah.
if you get a patient that has actually either talked about suicide or
Right.
tried to
tried.
commit suicide, whether it's an adult or
Or a
a
child.
patient. Everything is so acute
Right.
at this level. We're going to have to close out our program today, but I want to talk to you about something that is really important to us. We are trying to formulate a way to get your questions and answers not only to Dr. Jane and Dr. Caples, but the other Texas Tech Health Science Center doctors that you're going to be meeting over the next few weeks. And I'm going to be putting on my personal not website, my email address, so that you can address any of the doctors specifically, or a medical or mental health or physical health problem specifically, and then I'll get it to the right doctors that need it. And that way we'll answer those things on the air so that everybody will have, because if you've got a question, somebody else has a question. And it'll help us to get the information out that you really need, that you're really worried about right now. We really appreciate Dr. Caples and Dr. Jane coming to see us now several Sundays in a row, and they will come back later. But in the meantime, we're going to ask you to just email us with your questions and your comments, your problems that you don't know where to start with, and then we'll get them to the right doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week with another program.
Thanks for joining us for News West 9's West Texas View with Johnny Lou Avery. This has been a public affairs presentation of KWAB TV and KWES TV.